Marcus Reed drummed his fingers against the mahogany conference table, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the documents before him. At 34, he had built Red Industries into a hospitality empire through calculated moves and emotional detachment. Love was a luxury he couldn't afford until today, when it became a necessity he had to fake. The Cross Vineyard is the final piece, his lawyer explained, sliding aerial photographs across the table. Without it, the Sonoma Luxury Resort project dies. 5 years of planning, gone. Marcus studied the images of rolling hills dotted with ancient grapevines. The Cross family had owned the land for 4 generations, turning down every previous offer. But Jonathan Cross's recent diagnosis and mounting medical bills had changed everything. "They're willing to negotiate now?" Marcus asked. "Not exactly. Jonathan Cross refuses to sell, even facing bankruptcy. However, his daughter has proposed an alternative arrangement." The lawyer's expression grew cautious. Marriage. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus leaned back, his jaw tightening. "Explain." "Valentina Cross will marry you for 18 months. In exchange, Reed Industries gains development rights to the vineyard through spousal property laws, and the Cross family receives a substantial financial settlement to cover medical expenses and debt relief. After the resort opens, you divorce. Quietly, and she retains a small portion of the original property." Marcus had orchestrated dozens of mergers, but never one involving matrimony. "What makes her think I'd agree to such an arrangement?" "Because traditional acquisition has failed, and she's researched you thoroughly. No romantic entanglements. No family obligations. Purely business-focused. She believes you're the perfect candidate for a marriage of convenience." An hour later, Marcus stood in the Cross family's Victorian mansion, surrounded by fading elegance and desperate hope. Valentina Cross emerged from the shadows of the grand staircase like something from another era, dark hair cascading over her shoulders, emerald eyes that seemed to see through his carefully constructed walls. "Mr. Reed," she said, extending her hand with surprising firmness. "Thank you for considering this unconventional proposal." Her voice carried quiet strength beneath its gentle tone. Marcus found himself studying her face, searching for signs of desperation or deception, but finding only determination. "Miss Cross, your proposition is certainly unique." He gestured toward the living room, where her father waited in a wheelchair, oxygen tank beside him. "But I need to understand your motivations clearly." Jonathan Cross struggled to rise, but Valentina gently pressed his shoulder. "Stay seated, Papa." She turned to Marcus with fierce protectiveness. "My father built this vineyard from nothing. It's not just land to us, it's legacy, history, identity. Selling would kill him faster than the illness. Yet you're willing to marry a stranger to preserve it?" "I'm willing to enter a business partnership that happens to involve marriage," she corrected. "Clear terms, defined timeline, mutual benefit. You get your resort location, we keep our family heritage, everyone wins." Marcus appreciated her directness, though something about her unwavering gaze unsettled him. Most people either cowered before his reputation or tried to manipulate him. Valentina Cross did neither. 18 months is a long time to maintain a charade, he said. "Is it a charade if both parties understand the arrangement?" She moved to the window, looking out at the vineyard. "I've done my research, Mr. Reed. You're brilliant, ruthless, and completely uninterested in romantic complications. I'm practical, loyal, and have no illusions about love conquering all. We're perfectly matched for this kind of partnership." Clinical assessment should have pleased him, but instead it sparked an unexpected challenge in his chest. "After 18 months, we part ways professionally and personally. You have your resort, I have my father's legacy preserved, and enough financial security to start fresh somewhere new." She faced him again, chin raised. "Less, of course, you're concerned about maintaining professional distance from someone you'll be living with." The slight edge in her voice suggested she doubted his self-control. Marcus felt his competitive instincts sharpen. "Miss Cross, I've never met a challenge I couldn't handle." He pulled out his phone. "I'll have contracts drawn up within 48 hours. If you're certain about this arrangement, we can proceed immediately." As he left the Cross estate that evening, Marcus told himself this was simply another acquisition complex but manageable. He had no way of knowing that Valentina Cross would prove to be the one deal that would change everything he thought he knew about himself. The contract was just the beginning. Marcus stood, his penthouse's marble foyer, at precisely 6 a.m., watching movers carry Valentina's belongings through his front door. 3 suitcases, 2 boxes of books, and a collection of potted herbs, her entire life reduced to what could fit in his guest bedroom. "Where would you like the plants, Signora?" asked Rosa Martinez, his housekeeper of 8 years. The elderly woman had been the only person brave enough to speak directly to Marcus without formal appointment scheduling. And now she seemed genuinely excited about having another woman in the house. "Please, call me Valentina," came the warm reply from the kitchen. "And could we put them by the east windows? They'll need morning sunlight." Marcus frowned. His kitchen's east windows showcased a carefully curated view of the city's skyline, not a collection of basil and rosemary plants. But before he could object, David Kim, his assistant, rushed through the front door with his usual morning urgency. The Singapore investors moved the call to 7:30, and the construction permits for the Monterey project need David stopped mid-sentence. Staring at the domestic chaos surrounding them, "We have a house guest," Marcus said curtly, "temporarily." Actually, Valentina appeared in the doorway, flowers somehow already dusting her dark sweater. "I'm his wife." As of yesterday afternoon, she smiled at David's shocked expression. "Must be David Kim." Marcus mentions, "You're the person who actually runs Reed Industries." David's mouth opened and closed wordlessly while Marcus felt an unexpected jolt of irritation. How did she know David's name? He'd never mentioned his staff. To her, "I did some research," Valentina continued, as if reading his thoughts. "David Kim, Stanford MBA, promoted to executive assistant after saving the Portland acquisition from falling through. Rosa Martinez, originally from Guadalajara, sends money home to her daughter's medical school tuition." She turned to Rosa with genuine warmth. "Your daughter is studying to be a pediatric surgeon, isn't she?" Rosa's face lit up with pride and surprise. "Yes. But how did I believe in knowing the people who make things work?" Valentina said simply. Marcus watched this interaction with growing unease. In 5 minutes, his wife, his business partner, he corrected himself, had accomplished something he'd never bothered to do. She'd made his staff smile. The Singapore call, David reminded him weakly, still processing the marriage announcement. "Conference room," Marcus ordered. "Valentina, we'll discuss household arrangements this evening." But as he headed toward his home office, Rosa's voice, carried from the kitchen, "Signora Valentina, would you like me to prepare breakfast for you and Senara Marcus?" "Oh, I've already started something," came the cheerful reply. "Would you mind helping me figure out how this espresso machine works?" "I was thinking of making Marcus something more substantial than black coffee and toast." Marcus paused in his doorway. For 8 years, his morning routine had been invariable. Black coffee, wheat toast, financial reports. The idea of change felt like interference. 20 minutes into the Singapore call, an aroma began infiltrating his office, something rich and savory that made his stomach respond traitorously. David kept glancing toward the door, clearly distracted. "Focus," Marcus snapped. But even he was having trouble concentrating on quarterly projections when whatever Valentina was cooking smelled like childhood. Memories he'd forgotten he had. The call ended with successful negotiations, but Marcus felt oddly unsettled by the domestic sounds filtering through his usually silent home. Laughter from the kitchen. Rosa's speaking animated Spanish. Actual music playing softly. **** When he finally emerged, he found his dining room transformed. The sterile glass table now held place settings on actual placemats, a small vase of wildflowers, and plates of what appeared to be some kind of egg dish with herbs and cheese. "Frittata," Valentina announced, appearing with a coffee pot. "Rosa told me you usually skip breakfast, but you have 3 back-to-back meetings this morning. You'll need actual fuel. I don't have time for elaborate meals. It took 15 minutes. She poured coffee into a mug he'd never seen before, ceramic, handmade, somehow more satisfying to hold than his usual stark white cups, and Rosa says, You've been working 16-hour days for the past month. It's not sustainable. Marcus bristled at the criticism. My schedule isn't your concern, actually. It is. Valentina sat across from him with her own plate, completely unintimidated by his sharp tone. For the next 18 months, your health and reputation directly impact my family's security. If you collapse from exhaustion or malnutrition, it affects our arrangement. She was right, but her practical concern felt oddly disappointing. What had he expected wifely devotion? The frittata was annoyingly delicious. Marcus found himself finishing the entire portion while Valentina discussed logistics with the efficiency of a project manager. I've arranged to work remotely for the marketing firm that handles the vineyard's clients, she explained. My office will be the small room off the library. I'll stay out of your way. For public appearances, I'll need a schedule at least a week in advance. And Rosa has agreed to help me understand your preferences and routines. Very thorough, Marcus said, though something about her clinical approach bothered him. I told you I'm practical. Valentina stood to clear the dishes. But Marcus caught her wrist instinctively. Her skin was warm, softer than he'd expected. For a moment, neither of them moved. Rosa handles the cleaning, he said quietly. I handle my own dishes, she replied, but didn't pull away immediately. When she finally did, Marcus felt an odd sense of loss. As she moved toward the kitchen, found himself watching the confident way she navigated his space. Making it somehow warmer without changing anything fundamental, this was going to be more complicated than he'd anticipated. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Marcus found himself dreading the annual Reed Industries charity gala for the first time in his career. The event was essential for maintaining investor relationships and corporate image. But it would be Valentina's first public appearance as his wife. The business world would be watching, analyzing, judging every interaction. You look nervous? Valentina observed, adjusting his bow tie with surprising intimacy. They stood in his bedroom. Their bedroom now, though she'd insisted on separate beds, preparing for the evening ahead. I don't get nervous, Marcus replied, though his reflection revealed the tension in his shoulders. I strategize. Valentina wore a midnight blue gown that Rosa had helped her select, simple but elegant. She'd swept her dark hair into a sophisticated updo that revealed the graceful line of her neck. Marcus found it increasingly difficult to remember this was purely business. What's the strategy tonight? She asked, applying lipstick with steady hands. Minimal interaction. We appear together. I introduce you as my wife. You smile politely, and we maintain appropriate distance. No elaborate backstory about our courtship. People will lose interest quickly if we're boring enough. Boring, Valentina repeated, with a slight smile. I can manage boring. But the moment they entered the ballroom of the St. Regis, Marcus realized his strategy was flawed. Valentina wasn't boring. She was magnetic. Within minutes, she was deep in conversation with Thomas Brennan, his primary business rival, discussing sustainable agriculture practices. Your wife is fascinating, commented Judge Patricia Wells, approaching with her husband. She was just explaining how traditional vineyard techniques could revolutionize modern hospitality sustainability. Brilliant woman. Hatch. Across the room, gesturing animatedly as she spoke with a group of investors, her laugh carried over the orchestra, genuine and infectious. Several people turned toward the sound, smiling reflexively. She's certainly engaged, Marcus replied carefully. You're a lucky man, Judge Wells continued, although I have to say none of us saw this coming. You're always so adamant about avoiding personal entanglements. Before Marcus could respond, Thomas Brennan materialized beside them with Valentina on his arm. Reed, you've been hiding this treasure, Thomas said, with his practiced charm. Valentina was telling me about the Cross Vineyards organic certification process. Fascinating stuff. His hand lingered on her elbow possessively. I'd love to continue our conversation over dinner sometime this week. Marcus felt something dark and territorial surge through his chest. And my wife's schedule is quite full, he said, moving closer to Valentina. Actually, Valentina interjected smoothly, I'd be happy to discuss sustainable practices with anyone genuinely interested in environmental responsibility. She looked directly at Thomas with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Though, I should mention, my husband and I share everything. business conversations, dinner invitations, professional interests, complete transparency. The message was clear. Any approach to her went through Marcus. Thomas's smile tightened, but he retreated gracefully. Later, as they moved through the crowd, Marcus found himself genuinely impressed by Valentina's performance. She remembered names, asked thoughtful questions, and deflected intrusive inquiries about their relationship with graceful redirection. "You're surprisingly good at this," he murmured during a quiet moment, surprised that a vineyard owner's daughter understands social politics. There was an edge to her voice. "We hosted wine country events for years, Marcus. I know how to work a room." But the evening took an unexpected turn when Alina Cross, Valentina's younger sister, appeared near the silent auction tables. Marcus had never met her, but the family resemblance was unmistakable except where Valentina radiated warmth. Alina seemed brittle, desperate. "Val, thank God," Alina whispered, grabbing her sister's arm. "I need to talk to you now." Valentina's composure faltered for the first time all evening. "Alina, what are you doing here? How did you even Detective Claire Woods came by?" "House today," Alina interrupted, glancing nervously around the ballroom. "She's asking questions about Phoenix again, about what happened 5 years ago." The color drained from Valentina's face. Marcus stepped closer instinctively, though he had no idea what they were discussing. "That's impossible," Valentina said. Quietly, the case was closed. There was no evidence. "Well, someone's reopened it," Alina hissed. "And your sudden marriage to one of the most powerful men in California is raising all kinds of questions about your motivations." Marcus felt the foundation of his understanding shift. "What case?" he asked sharply. Both women turned to him as if they'd forgotten his presence. Valentina's eyes held a mixture of fear and resignation. "Alina, please," she said softly. "Not here." But Alina was past caring about discretion. The girl died, Marcus. 5 years ago in Phoenix, and they think Valentina killed her. The ballroom seemed to fade around them. Marcus stared at his wife. This woman he'd shared breakfast with argued. With begun to trust and realized he knew nothing about her at all. "It's not," Valentina began, but Alina continued ruthlessly. "Cameron Mitchell, 19 years old, found dead in her apartment. Valentina was the last person to see her alive. They questioned her for hours, searched her room, treated her like a criminal. When they couldn't prove anything, they let it go. But now suddenly she's married to a billionaire and they think she's been running some kind of long-term con." Marcus felt every business instinct screaming warnings. Scandal, investigation, potential criminal involvement, everything he'd spent his career avoiding. The smart move was clear. Distance himself immediately. Protect the company, minimize damage. But when he looked at Valentina's face pale, stricken, but holding his gaze with desperate honesty, he found himself asking a different question. "Did you do it?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "No," she said simply. "But I understand if you don't believe me." The weight of their arrangement suddenly felt crushing. 18 months of pretending to be married to a woman who might be a murderer. His reputation, his company, everything he'd built hanging in the balance. "We need to talk," he said finally, privately. As they left the gala early, Marcus caught Thomas Brennan watching them with speculative interest. By morning, he knew. Whispers would be spreading through every boardroom in the city. The question was, would he still be standing beside Valentina to face them?
Asterisk.
The ride home from the gala passed in suffocating silence. Marcus gripped the steering wheel of his Aston Martin while Valentina stared out the passenger window, her elegant facade crumbling with each passing streetlight. The city blurred past them. But all Marcus could hear were Elena's words echoing in his head. "They think Valentina killed her," inside his penthouse. Valentina kicked off her heels and sank onto the leather sofa, suddenly looking fragile in her midnight blue gown. Marcus poured himself a scotch with hands that trembled slightly, a weakness he despised. "Cameron Mitchell," he said, not turning around. "Tell me everything." Valentina's voice came soft but steady. "She was my roommate in Phoenix. I was working at a small marketing firm trying to save money to help with Papa's first round of treatments. Cameron was... troubled, Beautiful, smart, but she made dangerous choices. Marcus finally faced her, studying her expression for deception. What kind of choices? Drugs, gambling, men who hurt her. Valentina's hands twisted in her lap. I tried to help her, but Cameron was convinced she could fix everything with one big score. What happened the night she died? She called me at work, terrified. Said someone was following her, that she'd found something that could get her killed. Valentina's voice cracked slightly. I rushed home, but she was already packing. She gave me this envelope, made me promise to keep it safe, then left. That was the last time I saw her alive. Marcus set down his scotch. What was in the envelope? Photographs, bank statements. Evidence that Cameron had been blackmailing a city councilman about his gambling debts and connections to organized crime. Valentina looked up at him with haunted eyes. She was going to expose him, but she got scared and tried to run instead. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity, and they found her before she could disappear. Police said it looked like an overdose, but Cameron had been clean for 3 months. I knew it wasn't. Suicide. Valentina stood abruptly, pacing to the windows. When they questioned me, I was too frightened to mention the envelope. I was 23, terrified, and alone. I just wanted to survive. Where's the evidence now? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. I still have it, hidden in a safety deposit box. She turned to face him, chin raised defiantly. I kept it as insurance, in case they ever came after me. But Detective Woods must have found some connection between Cameron's death and my sudden marriage to you. Marcus felt the walls closing in. A murdered girl, blackmail evidence. Organized crime connections. It was a scandal that could destroy everything he'd built. His board would demand his resignation. Investors would flee. The Sonoma Resort project would die, along with his reputation. Lead to me, he said quietly. I omitted information, Valentina corrected. Everything I told you about my motivations was true. I needed this marriage to save my father and preserve our vineyard. But yes, I also needed to disappear from Phoenix. To start over somewhere they couldn't find me? The betrayal cut deeper than Marcus expected. For weeks, he'd been letting her into his life, sharing meals, conversations, small moments of unexpected intimacy. All the while, she'd been hiding this devastating secret. You used me, he said, the accusation hanging between them like a blade? Yes, Valentina admitted without flinching. Just like you used me to get the vineyard. The only difference is my secrets could actually hurt someone I love. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with an emergency alert. David's name appeared on the screen. Detective Claire Woods is downstairs. David's voice was tight with panic. She has a warrant to search the premises and wants to question both of you about Valentina's background. Marcus, there are news vans outside. This is everywhere. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus could see the vultures circling reporters. With cameras, news trucks, with satellite dishes. His private life was about to become public spectacle. Send her up, he said grimly, and call our lawyers. All of them. Detective Claire Woods was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She examined Marcus's penthouse with professional thoroughness, while 2 junior officers conducted their search. Mr. Reed, she began, settling into his living room as if she owned it. I'm sure you understand why we need to ask some questions about your wife's past. I understand you're fishing, Marcus replied coolly. My wife has committed no crime. Your wife was the last person to see Cameron Mitchell alive, Detective Woods countered. Now, 5 years later, she's conveniently married to one of the most powerful men in California. That's quite a coincidence. Valentina sat beside Marcus on the sofa, her spine straight despite the circumstances. Detective, I've already told you everything I know about Cameron's death. My marriage to Marcus has nothing to do with what happened. In Phoenix, doesn't it? Detective Woods pulled out a tablet, swiping to reveal financial records. Cameron Mitchell had been receiving payments from an offshore account for 6 months before her death, the same account that funded your father's medical treatments last year. Marcus felt the world tilt. He turned to stare at Valentina, whose face had gone chalk white. That's impossible, Valentina whispered. Is it? because it looks like someone's been very carefully orchestrating this entire situation. Detective Woods' smile was razor sharp. Cameron finds evidence of corruption, gets killed for it, and her roommate disappears. Then, years later, that roommate emerges with a perfect plan to marry into wealth and power. Very convenient. You're suggesting I've been planning this for 5 years? Valentina's voice rose with incredulous anger. That I somehow orchestrated my father's illness, his medical debt, even Marcus's need for our vineyard. I'm suggesting someone with access to significant resources has been moving pieces on a chessboard for a very long time.
Detective Woods
replied, and you, Mrs. Reed, are either a very clever criminal or a very useful pawn. As the detective continued her questions, Marcus found himself studying his wife's face, searching for tells, for cracks in her story. But all he saw was genuine confusion and growing fear. Either Valentina was innocent, or she was the most accomplished liar he'd ever met, and with his entire world crumbling around them, Marcus realized he was about to discover which truth would destroy him more completely. Asterisk, the morning sun cast long shadows across the Cross Vineyard as Marcus stood among the ancient grapevines, his expensive suit incongruous against the rustic landscape. 24 hours had passed since Detective Woods' interrogation, and he'd barely slept. The media circus outside his penthouse had forced him to retreat here. To the place where this entire arrangement had begun, Valentina emerged from the Victorian mansion carrying 2 cups of coffee, her face drawn with exhaustion. She'd spent the night at her childhood home after the police finished searching their shared penthouse, finding nothing but raising more questions. "Any word from the lawyers?" she asked, settling beside him on the weathered wooden bench her grandfather had built decades ago. "They're working on it," Marcus replied, accepting the coffee. "But Detective Woods has enough circumstantial evidence to keep pushing. The financial connection between that offshore account and your family's medical payments is problematic. I swear to you, Marcus, I have no idea how that money ended up in Papa's account. We thought it came from insurance settlements, delayed payments from old wine orders." Valentina's voice cracked with frustration. "Someone is manipulating us, but I don't understand why or how." Marcus had spent the sleepless night analyzing every angle, every possibility. His business instincts screamed that Valentina was either innocent or playing a game so sophisticated it bordered on genius. But watching her know vulnerable, frightened, yet still fierce in her loyalty to her family, he found himself believing. In her innocence, there's something else, he said quietly. "David discovered that Thomas Brennan has been making inquiries about our marriage since the gala. Discreet questions about your background, our timeline, the vineyard acquisition." Valentina looked up sharply. "You think he's involved?" "Thomas has wanted to destroy me professionally for years. If he could orchestrate a scandal that removes me from competition while acquiring prime development, land through my divorce settlement." Marcus left the implication hanging. Before Valentina could respond, Father Miguel Santos approached from the chapel at the edge of the property. The elderly priest had officiated at their hastily arranged civil ceremony, one of the few people who knew the true nature of their arrangement. "Forgive the interruption," Father Miguel said gently, "but there's someone here who insists on speaking with you both. She says it's about Cameron Mitchell." A woman in her 30s stood nervously in the chapel's doorway, blonde, well-dressed, with the kind of polished appearance that suggested money and careful grooming. She looked familiar, though Marcus couldn't place her. "My name is Jessica Torres," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "I was Cameron Mitchell's girlfriend, her secret girlfriend." Valentina gasped. "Jessica, but you moved to Seattle after Cameron died." "Yes. But I've been watching, waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions." Jessica's composure cracked. "Detective Woods contacted me yesterday about the reopened investigation, and I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore." She pulled out her phone, swiping to a recording app. "Cameron sent me this voicemail the night she died. I was too scared to give it to the police 5 years ago, but after seeing the news about Valentina's marriage and the investigation..." The recording crackled to life, Cameron's young voice filled with terror. "Jess, if something happens to me, you need to know the truth. It's not about the councilman anymore. He's just a middleman. Thomas Brennan is behind everything. Gambling debts, the money laundering, all of it. He's been using the councilman's connections to funnel dirty money through development projects. But I got greedy. Tried to blackmail him directly, and now, God, I think they're going to kill me. Evidence is with Valentina, but she doesn't know how dangerous it really is. If I disappear, tell her to run. I'll tell her Brennan will come. For anyone who threatens his empire, the silence that followed felt deafening. Marcus's mind raced as pieces of an elaborate puzzle clicked into place. Thomas's interest in their marriage, his questions about the vineyard, his convenient appearance at every social event where he could gather intelligence. There's more, Jessica continued, pulling out a manila envelope. Cameron was paranoid, so she made copies of everything. Bank records showing Thomas Brennan funneling money through shell companies. Photographs of him meeting with known criminals. Documentation of bribes and intimidation. She hid this set with me before she died. Valentina's hands trembled as she examined the documents. This is what she was trying to tell me. The envelope she gave me was just insurance. These are the real records. Thomas has been playing a long game, Marcus realized with growing fury. He killed Cameron to protect his secrets, and spent 5 years positioning himself to acquire both the vineyard and destroy me simultaneously. Our marriage gave him the perfect opportunity. But how did he manipulate the medical payments? Valentina asked. Father Miguel, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Forgiveness, but I may have an answer to that. Last year, when your father's treatments began, Thomas Brennan's foundation made a substantial anonymous donation to the hospital. I remember because they asked me to bless the gift. The priest's face grew troubled. I thought it was genuine. Charity, but it gave him access to patient financial records, Marcus finished grimly. He could easily arrange for money to flow into your family's accounts, creating a paper trail that would implicate you later. The scope of Thomas's manipulation was breathtaking. Years of careful planning. Multiple contingencies. Innocent people used as pawns in a game of corporate warfare and criminal conspiracy. We have to take this to Detective Woods, Valentina, I said, but Marcus was already pulling out his phone. First, we're calling the FBI, he said. This isn't just about Cameron's murder anymore. It's about organized crime. It's money laundering and conspiracy at the highest levels. As Marcus made the call, Valentina reached for his free hand, intertwining their fingers. The gesture was unconscious, natural, and for the first time in days, Marcus felt something other than anger and betrayal. I'm sorry, she whispered, for everything. For the secrets, for dragging you into this danger, for don't, Marcus interrupted. Ending his call and turning to face her fully, you were protecting your family and trying to survive. Thomas Brennan is the one who turned our arrangement into a weapon. Our arrangement, Valentina repeated softly. Is that still what this is? Marcus looked at her really hand, saw not the desperate woman who had proposed a marriage of convenience, but the brave, kind, fiercely loyal person who had been making his sterile life warmer without him realizing it. Somewhere between shared breakfast conversations and watching her charm his staff, between her defiant challenges and gentle gestures, the lie had become truth. No, he said quietly. I don't think it has been for weeks. Before Valentina could respond, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. FBI agents, Detective Woods, and a small army of law enforcement descended on the peaceful vineyard. But as they prepared to give their statements and turn over the evidence that would finally bring Thomas Brennan to justice, Marcus felt an unexpected sense of peace. The contract that had brought them together was about to be dissolved by forces beyond their control. But the love that had grown in its place, tentative, fragile, but undeniably real, was something no one could take away. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the same vineyard chapel where Father Miguel had married them the first time. But today, surrounded by friends and family who finally knew the whole truth. He was marrying Valentina again, not for business, not for land, not for convenience, but for the simple, revolutionary reason that he couldn't imagine his life without. Her Rosa Martinez cried openly in the front row, while David Kim managed logistics with his usual efficiency. Jonathan Cross, his health improving thanks to proper treatment and the lifting of financial stress. Walked his daughter down the aisle with tears of joy, and as Valentina approached in a simple white dress that made her look radiant. That sometimes the greatest victories came not from calculated strategies, but from the courage to let your heart make the final decision. Thomas Brennan was facing multiple life sentences. The Sonoma Resort project was moving forward with the Cross family as equal partners rather than displaced victims. And Marcus Reed, who had spent his entire adult life believing that love was a luxury he couldn't afford, had discovered it was actually the only investment that truly mattered. Their second wedding was everything their first had not been genuine, joyful, and filled with the promise of a future built on truth rather than lies. As Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife for real this time, Marcus kissed Valentina with the passion he'd been holding back for months, finally free to love her without pretense or fear. The CEO's heart hadn't just melted, it had been completely transformed, proving that sometimes the most successful merger is the one that joins two souls who were meant to find each other. Oh, even in the most unlikely circumstances. The end asterisk.